All right, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. I'm gonna go ahead and go over the tier list. So, got it broken down by each individual class. All right. This is gonna be like one encompassing all tier list. I'll do a more detailed tier list probably once a point five comes out. We'll go into each individual um, spec and class and ranking and everything. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and go into this. All right. So first, I want to say left to right means absolutely nothing. Don't get caught up because, oh, well, why'd you put this at the end of A tier? It's clearly better. Doesn't matter. Okay. Next up, let's talk about the rankings here. All right. So S is probably going to be your meta. A is your meta potential, but not really meta. B is it's viable, it's good, but C is not doing great, and D is completely unplayable. All right. So again, this can be geared more towards Mythic Plus. So first up, we have Affliction Warlock. All right. So I have actually seen Affliction. They appear to be doing pretty good. Um, Very situational. I noticed in like the 2 to 4 range, they're kind of not doing great. Their damage does fall off once you get in the higher keys when things start lasting too long. Maintaining the either the 100% uptime on agony causes the DPS loss, or agony dropping off also causes the DPS loss. So like a lot of the pulls are very dependent, and you really have to pull around the um the the affliction warlock. So unfortunately, as much as I hate to do it, affliction is going to go into the C tier. Now, with that being said, you can play them. They are still viable. So next up, we have Destruction Warlock. So Destruction is in a very, very different boat. They are doing insanely well. They have phenomenal single target. They have phenomenal AoE. The utility that they're bringing is actually very helpful in a lot of these dungeons. So, I don't think they're doing enough to be meta. I think that there's a lot of classes out there that are just out DPSing them and they're just doing better. But I think in all, I think it does have potential, so it's going to go up in the A tier. All right, next up is going to be our destruction lord. Next up is going to be our demonology warlock. So demonology appears to be doing okay. They've gotten some changes. They've gotten some tuning and stuff. Their DPS isn't as great. Their utility is still there, but a lot of it is still proc based. A lot of the way that things proc just doesn't make sense. They have a little bit longer cooldowns on some of their demons, which can cause their DPS to fall off pack to pack. Um, Single target, they're doing pretty good from what I've seen. Overall, I'm gonna put demonology into the B tier. All right, I think they're doing well, but they've got a few issues that still need to get worked out. All right. Arcane Mage. So Arcane Mage is absolutely insane. Single target AoE. They've got the utility, the survivability. They've got it all. All right. So all in all, I would say Arcane is actually in the S tier right now. Insane burst, insane and absolutely crazy AoE when it goes off. I actually just ran with an arcane mage, and like they were popping off on some of the bigger pulls, but they were also keeping up on the smaller pulls, and the single target was so very good. So they are going to maintain their um S tier spot. Fire mage, fire mage is doing well. Their damage is not quite there though. In your combustion, you've got a lot of damage. Outside of combustion, you seem to be struggling. And then just the overall damage of abilities is actually going to earn them a B tier spot. Again, I think they're doing okay. They're doing well, but and that's the issue that we're going to continue to run into with fire. All right, next up we've got frost. So frost is in a very similar boat to fire. They're doing pretty good. They're doing well. They've got really good cleave. They've got really good single target, but they're just not doing very well in AOE. Yes, you can pump and you can do really good numbers in AOE, but you're falling off when it comes to some of these other specs and some of these other classes that can just do more than you can. They're just not there. All right, so they're going to end up in B tier. Still, I think any of the three mage specs are going to be viable to take with you. They each bring their own individual thing, and they have lust. Next up is arms warriors. So arms, unfortunately, It's a C tier. Their damage is just not there. They've got a couple of bursty phases. They've got some areas where they do excel, but overall, they're being outperformed by pretty much every class in the game. They're not quite unplayable yet because there are still things that you can do to make them work, and I'm sure you could comp specific for an arms warrior. All right, next up we've got Fury Warrior. Fury is actually in a much different place than what Arms is at. They are doing insanely well. Single target AoE. I actually have some people in my guild who run Arms, and they are doing absolutely insane damage. I saw a guy last night playing Arms, super undergeared for keys, and still running, and still at times topping the meters. So they're in a very, very good place right now. I'm gonna put them into A tier, mostly because I don't think a DPS warrior could reach S tier because they just don't have utility. They don't have the toolkit to just be great. So I think that when it comes right down to it, Fury has the potential to be an S tier spec, but it just needs a little bit more. It needs to something else to make it better, right? So next up, we've got Protection Warrior. So Protection Warrior is actually one of the classes I've been playing a lot. It was the first class or the first spec I hit 2K on this season, and it is just absolutely insane once you get your force set, and once you get your force set, once you're able to start pushing keys and you get into keys where things are going longer, you're doing insane amounts of damage. Some of the top tanks in the game right now are playing Protection Warrior. So overall, Prot Warrior is actually going to hit S tier. I think that they could use a utility bonus, but I think that if you run a melee comp or even some range comps, uh, Prot Warrior is just great, especially with your heroic leap. You're able to get ahead of your group. You're able to get in first. You can get through your opener and already have defensives rolling, and you're rotating everything before your group even gets there to attack. And I think that that just gives them an edge above most other tanks. And I think it's what makes them just slightly better than everybody else. Next up, we've got Assassination Rogue. So I know that Assassination kind of has some bugs going on right now, but like they're still pushing good keys. They're still doing insane damage. Once you get your stat alignment and once you get that opener in the rotation, AoE, you're just blowing things out of the water. I think right now Assassination is struggling with single target in lower keys. So it's probably anything below like a 10, they're going to struggle because the fights just don't last long enough. I can't speak for everybody, but one thing I've noticed is running 10s is super chill and it's super easy. And then you get into an 11, it's like, oh my God, where did all this health come from? Why is this fight taking so long? It just feels longer. And I think Assassination really needs that. Oh yeah, this fight's going to take a minute. This is going, because then they have their chance to let all of their bleeds actually hit the target. They let everything happen, and I think that that puts them into A tier. I think the bugs are keeping them out of S tier right now, and I think if we get a bug fix for Assassination, then I think that they could be potentially bumped into S tier based off of the utility, the interrupts. I've definitely noticed that when I'm playing with an Assassination Rogue, I can make bigger pulls because I know that I have the stops there so that they handle all those stops for me, and then I can just pull, get set up, get going, be rotating my defensives, doing everything that I need to do, and then boom, I'm good to go. All right. So I think Assassination brings a lot to your group. I think it has the potential to be an S tier spec. I just think that there's a lot of issues going on with it that Blizzard needs to fix as far as like bug fixes. And I think once that happens, then Assassination can easily be bumped into the S tier. All right. Next up, we've got Sub Rogue. So I'm very torn about Sub Rogue. Overall, Sub is doing okay. Their burst is absolutely insane, and if I were gonna judge them solely based off of their ability to burst and get through their opener, then they would be an S tier spec. The problem is once they burst, you've got about 2 to 3 minutes before you can actually get another burst in. And so in low keys, sub is just not the move. They're not able to sustain their damage nearly as well as some of the other specs. They're not able to keep up with most people, and then they burst ahead of everybody, and then they fall off, and they burst ahead of everybody, and they fall off. So I think in raid they're definitely doing well, and I think if you're doing higher keys where most encounters are going to last that 3.5 minutes for them to get through two full burst phases, I could see them being potentially good. But I think right now their cooldowns are just too their cooldowns are too long and their burst phases don't last long enough. So I think they're going to go into the B tier, just because like they're doing good, but they need conditions, and I think that that's going to hold them back from A tier and S tier. So combat, or outlaw, whatever you want to call it these days. So outlaw rogue is not in a bad place, but like you don't see a whole lot because they're being outshined by both sub and assassination, and I think that puts them automatically into C tier. I really haven't seen enough outlaw rogues to be able to judge where they're at on the meters. I know that there was a lot of talk about them being really, really good at the beginning of the season, and everything was gonna be good. And then a lot of people were saying without a tier set, you're garbage. And then the tier set changed, something changed. So I really could not say one way or the other, but just out of the simple fact that you don't see outlaw rogues nearly as much as you see sub rogues and as you see assassination rogues, I think that just automatically is going to put them in the C tier. Balanced druid. So before I say this, I have multiple friends who run balanced druid. I know balanced druid just got some buffs. All right, but I am going to go ahead and say it. Balanced Druid is going to be a C tier spec. All right. And here's why. Balance is doing good, but they're not doing great. They're bringing utility, but it's almost like that's all you're bringing them for. Even the friends I have who run balance, when we're running Mythic Plus, they're they do damage and they keep up, but majority of them are in like that 705 to or the, excuse me, the 700 to the 707 range. So like they're already over geared for the content we're doing. They're able to push those high keys, but they're not doing it because their damage just isn't good enough. And I think that in reality, even with these buffs that balance just got, I don't think that balance is going to be, well, they bring really good utility, but they're slightly low on damage. I think it's they bring good utility. And I think that that's what balance is running into. And I think that's the overall problem with playing a balanced druid right now. It's nothing to do with the class, nothing to do with the spec, nothing to do with anything like that. I just don't think that they have enough utility to compensate for their damage yet. Again, after these buffs have gone through and once we see where balance is sitting after these buffs, I think it is very, very likely that we will bump them up to a B tier. But for now, I am going to leave them in C tier just because they're just not doing good enough. All right. Feral Druid. So I think this is probably one of the first times I've ever really seen this. Um, Feral Druid is actually going to rank above Balanced Druid, and I'm not sure if I want to put it into the A tier or the B tier. I think probably B tier because they bring really good utility and they do bring really good damage with the bleeds and the bites. And if you run, someone was telling me the other night that there's a hybrid build that you can run now that is splitting your damage between your bleeds and your bites almost 50-50. And so you're putting all your bleeds out in your opener and then you're doing your bites to buff your damage or to do damage all the way up until your bleeds start taking over. And we're seeing a lot of feral druids taking over in melee comps. All right, so I think that they're doing well, but I don't think they're doing well enough to be widely recognized. I don't think you would run a feral druid outside of a melee comp, and I think that if you don't have a warrior and a monk both in the party, I don't think you're going to run a feral druid. But I definitely think that there is potential, and I think that maybe probably like another 5% buff to feral druid could bump them into A tier for sure. But I think they are a little bit too conditional on the comp, and I think that is going to give them the butt to keep them in B tier. All right. So next up, we have Guardian Druid. So Guardian Druid is also going to be in the B tier. They're really good tanks right now. They have a lot of utility. They have a lot of self-sustainability, and they have a lot of advantages that they bring to the party. The problem that you're running into with Guardian Druid right now is it doesn't do enough damage. I know Squish is doing some pretty good damage with his. We have a druid in our guild that he's running some pretty high end keys and he's doing pretty well on damage. Um, but overall, normal druids or excuse me, normal guardian druids, they're just not doing enough damage to keep up with where the other tanks are at. Um, and it is kind of bad. I think a lot of it is because most everything is going into the arcane damage that we're getting from the tier set and from the talent builds and from the hero trees. I think that if we could get buffs of some kind, then I think that would change the way Guardian Druid is playing right now, and I think that would do a lot to fix what the issues we are, because I think Guardian Druid I think in reality, Guardian Druid could compete for the Druid spot in the meta comp, or excuse me, the melee comp. I think that right now, any of the four Druid specs could play in the melee comp, or excuse me, in a meta comp and be okay. But I think that overall, Guardian needs some damage buffs before they're making it to that level. Um, as of the last I saw, they are currently the lowest damage dealing tanks. The buffs that came to Blood kind of bumped them up just slightly higher, with Brew being insane on single target and AoE. Prop Paladin being able to get the jump up now. I'm pretty sure that Guardian Druid is the lowest damage dealing tank. And I think that is really what is keeping them in the hole and preventing them from actually doing well on the overall charts. All right. So next up we have Restoration Druid. So Resto Druid is actually doing insane right now. They are fitting into just about any comp. I think that Blood Death Knight and Prop Paladin are the only two tanks not taking them. I think that you could even stack a Guardian Druid with a Feral Druid, or excuse me, a Guardian Druid with a Restoration Druid, and I think that you'd be okay. And I think that you could potentially make a very good comp double stacking druids. Um, as far as I know, it's the only comp that makes sense to stack class. There are different comps out there that are stacking classes, and I think that they're doing okay. But I think overall, um, what we're seeing is Restoration Druid is just so powerful, and the interaction that they are having with Prot Warrior um, and Brewmaster Monk is undeniable, because you're able to cat weave and you're able to go in and you can do massive amounts of damage and turn massive amounts of damage into healing, and you can do a lot for the group as a guardian or as a restoration druid that I don't think any other healer in the game right now has the ability to do as well as Restoration Druid. Okay. So we're going to put them in the S tier. I think that Resto Druid is probably one of the best healers in the game right now when it's played correctly. I think it's also very, very easy to mess it up because it is not an easy healer to play. So you got to be careful with that. So next up, we have Beast Mastery Hunter. All right, so Beast Mastery is super, super easy to play. They just got some really good buffs. They're doing very well, but I think that Beast Mastery is struggling from the or marksmanship issue. Um, I think in general, Beast Mastery is definitely they've got good utility, they've got good damage, they've got a lot that they can offer the party. I think that if they had a battle res, they would be an S tier spec. But I think in all, um, Beast Mastery is going to go into the A tier. They're doing just so good right now, and they're bringing a lot to your group. I think that they're still struggling from the fact that they're a hunter. Marksmanship is in a very similar state to Beast Mastery. They're doing very, very well. They're doing very, very good, but they're still struggling from they're good in certain keys. And so I think that's going to keep them in the A tier as well. The damage is there, the utility is there, the rotation is there, the group benefit is there. They've got everything. It's just certain keys are holding them back, and I don't think that's big enough to put them into a B tier. Because if you're doing really, really well in every aspect except certain keys, I don't think that's a but. I think that's just design on the keys, design on the class, and I don't think it's a problem when you have two specs of the same class. There is some gearing discrepancies. I get that, but you can balance it out to where it makes it work. Pick up one or two different items and swap out one or two pieces of gear based off of which spec you're going to run for which dungeon. All right. Survival. So survival is actually doing pretty good right now. They're able to pump really good numbers, but again, I think they're comp dependent, and they're dungeon dependent as well. So I'm going to put survival into a B tier. Like I said, they're doing very good. They bring good damage. They bring good utility, but they're not the best for a range comp, and they're not the best without certain modifiers to buff their damage. I think that you need a warrior or a monk if you want to get maximum utility out of a survival hunter. But at the same time, they're still doing really well. Just slightly below Beastmastery and Marksmanship, and I think that this is just a big enough butt that is preventing them from being in the meta. So I'm gonna move Blood DK to the bottom here. We're gonna go into Frost. All right, so Frost Death Knight. Frost is doing insane damage right now. They are doing insane single target. They have insane cleave and they have insane AoE. I don't think that they're the best of the best, and I don't think they're just like the ultimate DPS to play. But they are so high up and they're doing so well right now that it definitely earns them a spot in the S tier. I think that they're very well balanced, and I think that if you're running them in a melee comp, they're going to just explode out the water. And I think that if you're running them in a range comp, they have enough damage to keep up or do better than most of the range classes. I know last I saw they were actually out DPSing arcane mages by about 2% in overall damage, and on engagements it was very engagement to engagement of who was going to be ahead, Frost or Arcane. um so I think Frost is in such a good place right now that they're gonna explode, and they're gonna keep their place in S tier, and they're gonna maintain their viability. All right, Unholy. So Unholy is actually not in a bad place. I think that the design of the spec is pushing a lot of people towards Frost. I think that a lot of people are kind of upset with the direction the Blizzard is taking them. But overall, they're doing good damage. They bring a lot of good utility. They have a battle res. They have grips. They have extra damage. But I think the sheer fact that they're just not being played by 90% of Death Knights is gonna put them in the B tier. Sheer popularity of the spec is what's holding them back, because it's hard to get a lot of data on something that not very many people are playing, especially in high keys. Once you get really to tens and above, that's where a lot of people are switching to Frost, and that's where a lot of people are running Frost. And even still, like I looked at a couple people on Raider IO, and they had timed keys as Unholy, but majority of their keys were being done as Frost at a higher end level. And I think that is hurting Unholy because they're just not, the design of the spec, while it's good, it's being outperformed. And I think that if it's going to be outperformed, then it's not going to be able to make it into the A tier or the S tier. All right. All right. Blood DK. All right. I know they just got the damage increase and they just got the bone shield armor increase. Okay. However, with that being said, Blood DK is the worst tank in the game right now, and it needs some serious changes. So what we're seeing is Blood DK is dying to melee hits. No other tank is dying to melee hits unless you mess up your rotation. So we're dying to melee hits. We can't survive the initial attack through defensives on high end keys. But with the changes, we're seeing that our magic damage and our poison damage is just not good enough to do anything. And on top of that, prior to this damage buff that we got a couple days ago, Blood DK was the lowest damage dealing tank by a lot. Like, they were doing worse than Prop Paladin. They were doing worse than Guardian Druid. They were doing worse than every tank in the game. And it was such a fight to generate your threat through your attacks. And so you're constantly taunting and gripping. It's a lot of what we saw with Prot Warrior in season 1. And so all in all, Blood DK is unplayable. It is the worst tank in the game. It has so many problems. It has so many issues self-sustaining. It has so many issues surviving that if you're not running with a healer who knows exactly what they're doing, you're screwed. You cannot play a Blood DK, and you cannot play a Blood DK well unless you are just in the most coordinated group with the exact timing of everything and everything is perfect. Blood DK is just an unplayable tank right now. All right. So let's get off my soapbox here. All right, Brewmaster Monk. All right, so Brewmaster is doing insanely well right now. The way that the defensives are working, the way that stagger works, the way that you're building everything, and the damage you're doing, the buffs that you are bringing, the buffs you're getting from a warrior, the buffs you're bringing to the party, they are insane right now, and it is just amazing to see that Brewmaster Monk is finally in the S tier. It is a phenomenal tank to have in your party. It is a phenomenal tank to go with you. And I think that if you have the chance of bringing a Brewmaster, I think that it should be your choice to take, especially in a melee comp. I've been running melee comps, and I've been running range comps, and I've been running mixed comps. And it doesn't matter. Every single time, it is just doing insane damage. It is doing so well. The only issue that I really see with Brew is there are still some threat issues if you're pushing content or if you're outgeared by your party. Other than that, I think Brewmaster is sitting in such a good place right now that there's really no other choice but to put them into S tier. All right. All right, next up we've got Mistweaver. So Mistweaver is actually not doing that great this season. Their output is not great. Some of the changes that have happened did not really benefit them. You're not seeing a lot of popularity with them, and you're not really seeing them do a whole lot. So I'm gonna put them into C tier. They're viable, they're playable, but they probably aren't going to be your first choice unless you know that that person has been playing for a while and knows exactly what they're doing. I think that's really where you're going to benefit from having a Mistweaver Monk. All right. So Windwalker is going to go straight into the B tier. Windwalker is doing insanely well. They're doing great in Raid. They're doing good in Mythic Plus. The problem that Windwalker is running to is they're still struggling from the same hard cap that they have been for quite some time. If the pull is more than 5 targets, then they're just not doing very well. They bring a lot of utility. They bring a lot to the group. They do a lot to help, but their damage falls off past 5 targets, and I think that that is going to keep them in the B tier for the time being. All right. Next up, we have Evokers. So Devastation is going to go in the A tier. Their class and spec utility is great. They fit in very well with ranged and melee comps. They're doing overall their damage is really good right now, especially AOE. Their single target is doing really well. We've seen a lot of evokers being played in the raid. All in all, they're just doing so good in pretty much every type of content right now, and I think that that's going to keep them in the A tier for a while. Preservation. So Preservation has a lot of burst heals, but their setup takes forever. Their spot healing is garbage. Their ranged healing is garbage. They need to be in a melee comp to do well. They need everybody to be kind of grouped up to benefit. They are going to do pretty good in raids. But all in all, I think in Mythic Plus, unless you're playing a perfect group, coordinated, everybody's working, able to rotate their defenses properly, the Preservation Evoker is able to do all the right things, I think that they're going to be unplayable yet again. I think that we need to see some massive changes to Preservation before we can actually see them move up into a playable tier slot. All right. Next up, we have Augmentation. So Augmentation, their damage is actually doing pretty good. Their group utility is doing pretty good. They're not a bad. It's not a bad DPS spec anymore. I don't think it's dead. I don't think it's a meta, and I think that there are a lot of variables that are going to keep them down. So I'm going to put them in a C tier just because, overall, um, they're okay. They're not great. They don't really stand out and shine in any particular thing, but they're doing okay. All right. So next up, we have Discipline Priest. So Discipline Priest has been doing pretty well. They've taken some nerfs and buffs to their Mythic Plus playstyle, and I think that just because they're doing well, spot healing is not great, but their absorbs are good. They play really well with most any tank. They do a little bit better with Protection Paladin, than any other tank, but all in all, they're still very playable. They're still very good healers. They're still putting out really good numbers. So I think they're going to end up in the A tier as opposed to the S tier. All right. So next up we have Shadow. So Shadow is doing phenomenal right now. They're being played in a lot of range comps. They're being played in a lot of hybrid comps. So I think that Shadow is definitely not suffering from what they used to. I think that their damage is really, really well right now. They're benefiting a lot from different group comps, and we're actually seeing Shadow rise more than anything else. But I don't think it's quite S tier yet. I think it's gonna stay in the A tier. I think that in general, they could potentially move up to the S tier if they had like a designated comp that just made them excel. But most of the range comps we're seeing are being played with prop paladins, and a prop paladin is going to take a discipline priest, which you don't want to stack your classes. So I think Shadow just kind of has to fit in where they can fit in, and I think that's going to hold them back from the A tier. But I think everything else is just going insane, and I think that they're doing very, very, very well. All right, Holy Priest. So Holy Priest does really good. They have good spot healing. They have good AoE healing. They have good everything. Their damage is definitely lower than every other healer right now, and I think that that's going to prevent them from doing super high keys. But I think that in general, they're going to be a B tier spec. And I think that if they got some damage buffs, or if they got a little more clash utility, or if they even just got a healing buff, I think that they would bump up into the A tier, but there's a few too many buts to put them there. Moving on to shamans. So elemental. Man, elemental is going so crazy right now. They have so much clash utility. They have so much going for them. I'm going to put them into S tier. The S tier is just the perfect spot because their utility, they bring lust, they bring insane damage, they bring group utility, they bring a shaman buff. They are just going so hard right now that I think that they are very, very much a solid spec to play with and a solid spec to add to your group. I would almost say that Elemental Shaman is probably a better option than an Arcane Mage. I think the damage from Elemental is slightly higher. Um, I think I think Arcane is excelling at single target by a little bit, and Elemental is excelling. I think Elemental is excelling in the AoE more, but I think that they're so close that it's maybe a 1 to 2% difference, right? Enhancement. So enhancement is not doing terrible. Um, they're definitely way behind majority of the other melee DPS, and I think that they're capable, but I think it requires a group comp to be set up, and I think that they would have to be in a melee comp. And very much like survival, they have all this utility, they have all this stuff, but their damage isn't there unless they're set up very, very well, or there's just a player who is excelling above everybody else. And I think that is going to push them into the B tier as well. So next up, we have Restoration Shaman. Okay, so Resto Shaman is doing insane. They're able to heal through just about anything right now. They're able to push the high end keys. They're able to do low keys. They're able to excel just about anywhere. They are definitely going to excel more with a melee comp than anything else, but they are still very good in hybrid groups, and they're also good in a range comp as well. I think that they are just right now. I think right now with the group comp variations, and I think that with their healing abilities, with everything, I think that they are just one of the best healers. I think I would argue that they are better than Resto Druid to an extent. They have class utility, they have group utility, they have so much going for them that it is going to earn them their rightful place in an S tier position. All right. So next up we have Havoc Demon Hunter. So Havoc is doing insane right now. There is a comp out there that's stacking Havoc. Their burst is insane. Their sustained damage is insane. Single target AOE doesn't really matter. I think right now Havoc has earned their place in S tier, and I think that that is where they should stay. Next up we have Vengeance. So Vengeance is still doing very well. They are still one of the best self-sustained tanks in the game. They are excelling in a lot of different places. They have a lot of class utility that they bring. I think it's also going to put them into the S tier. I think that the fact that you can stack a Havoc Demon Hunter and a Vengeance Demon Hunter just because they're both doing really, really well. I think that that just puts them above everything else because you're not really going to stack very many of these other tanks with their DPS or with their respective DPS spec. All right, and I think the fact that Vengeance is able to do that and do well is definitely a bonus for the spec as a whole, and I think that it is going to just slightly push them above everybody else. So next up, we have Holy Paladin. So Holy Paladin is not in a great place right now, but they're not in a terrible place right now. They bring pretty decent group utility. They do have a battle res. They've got good healing, but again, they're still suffering from like the am I a ranged healer or am I a melee healer? They don't have identity and they don't have anything that's really just setting them apart from everybody else. So I think that in general, Holy is going to have to go in the C tier. They're not unplayable, but they're not good enough to take under certain circumstances. I think that if you are going to take a Holy Paladin, then I think that you need to make sure that they have experience, they know what they're doing, and they're able to keep up with your group and make sure that they're able to keep up with the group comp no matter what. Prop Paladin. So Prop Paladin is actually doing pretty well. There have been some changes. A lot of people are actually pushing higher keys with them. They are bumping up. But I think that Prop Paladin is struggling from the position of they need certain healers to do well. They need a certain group comp to do well. They have insane utility. They have insane survivability. They have very good self sustainability. Their defensives are very strong. But I think that the only thing preventing me from putting them into an S tier spec is the fact that they do have to be a little bit more particular with healers because they do need some bursty heals and then they need some spot heals and then they need sustaining and I think that that in and of itself is going to keep them in the A tier for me. Their damage is not good enough to be at the higher their damage is not good enough to keep up with Vengeance, Brew, or Prot. And I think that that is going to hold them back on a lot of different things. And I think that they're very sustainable in the high keys, and I think they are very good, but I don't think they're good enough to be a meta. Um, they're they're definitely good enough to be above the B tier, but they're not good enough for the S tier. So I think that if you have a prop paladin, it will definitely help you, especially in places like Gambit and Halls of Atonement. Those are both very interrupt heavy dungeons that a prop paladin is going to excel in. And so even Priory, having a lot of interrupts, a prop paladin is going to benefit you and it's going to help you out a lot. Ret Paladin. So Ret Paladin started off the season in a rough and tough spot. But since then, they are excelling. Their 4-set is doing insane amounts of damage. They're one of the highest damage dealing specs in the game. They bring a lot of class utility. They bring a lot of good defensives. They bring a lot of group utility. And if you pair them in a melee comp with a Prot Warrior or with a Brewmaster Monk, it's only going to make them that much better. So I think that they're actually going to sit probably in the S tier. Just because they don't really have much playing against them, except that at the super high end of content, maybe they're falling off a little bit because they have to do more to survive. But at the same time, like if you're pairing with a healer that can work around their defensives, a rep paladin who knows what they're doing, I think that a rep paladin could very, 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 very easily push the high end of content. So there you have it. That's going to be what our tier list looks like. As you can see, it's a lot of very good balancing across the specs. I think that this is probably one of the first times that I have ever done a tier list where the unplayable and the probably don't take specs did not overlap in classes. So with that being said, I think that every class in this game is very playable at very different levels. I think you can definitely get your weekly keys done on any of these classes except maybe Blood Decay and Preservation Evoker. But I think if you're gonna push anything past probably like maybe a 12 to 15, you're gonna get a little bit more restricted. But even then, we still have a lot of representation in the S and A tier. So if you're able to swap your spec around just a little bit, I think that at any key level, you can 100% complete anything that you want to right now. Um, I think the only thing that you're really going to end up running into issues with is probably going to be like the highest of high keys. But I think that at a 15 and below, you're able to run these S and A tier specs, which is going to give you very good class differences. I think anything at probably like a 12 and below, the A, B, and C tier are really going to work. And I think anything below a 10, you could very easily run any of these specs and you would be okay. Blood Decay and Brezivoker might struggle a little bit. So I would honestly say, actually, I'll revise what I said. I think that at a 10 and below, you could run the A, B, or C tier and be just fine. And then I think anything probably below like a 6, you could run any of these and be okay. Which is enough to give you some hero loot. It's enough to give you some hero in the vault. It's good to give you your crests, what you need. And I think that at the end of the day, all of these specs are playable in Mythic Plus right now. It just depends on what key level do you want to play, what spec do you want to play, what do you enjoy. And so I think that we are very much in a place right now where you can play whatever you want and you can do whatever you want and you'll be just fine. But this is what our tier list looks like. So hope you guys enjoyed. If you like this, leave a comment. If you disagree with where I placed one of the specs, if you have your own opinions, please let me know in the comments. If you want to see more like this, you want to see more content, then make sure you guys like and subscribe.